Breaking news moments ago from Pete Thamel of ESPN. Troy Dannen, the athletic director at the University of Washington, is leaving to go to Nebraska, finalizing a 6-year deal. He's only been here for about 6 months, and now he is out the door. Joining us right now for a little more on this story is the man who broke it, Pete Thamel himself. Good morning, Pete. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you.
So what happened here?
I think it's pretty simple. Troy Dannen is of the Midwest. He was the AD at Northern Iowa for 8 years, and that's where his family is from. That's where his wife's family is from. And, if you grow up in the Midwest in college athletics, Nebraska is a destination. And, obviously the timing is not great, right? Like that's a very obvious thing. And that will certainly, I'm sure, be a focus of your calls today, right? But yeah. I just think in this era of college athletics, it's, you look at Caden Proctor leaving the portal, right? We're all free agents. And, this was an opportunity, from what sources told me, that Troy Dannen saw as a way to get home to a destination job. It wasn't a slight on Washington as much as it was a slight on Washington's geography, So yeah. I think that's like a pretty simple, explanation. I feel like you could do a podcast on like the job of Washington football, which has been a much better job the last 20 years of Nebraska football versus the tradition. The resources are excellent at Nebraska. I was through there right before the draft. I did a Midwest swing last year, and Trev Alberts told me it's the only Big Ten school that does not have any debt. Like, it didn't have a dime of debt. So you think about it, they went through basically 20 years of pretty brutal football, and they've had I think 5 ADs since 2007, something like that, and that people just kept showing up, and they'll be well poised for for the NIL era, and are well poised for that. And I guess one other thing that I mentioned, and I have a story up on ESPN.com, is that Troy Dannen and Matt Rule have a relationship from their time in the AAC. Troy's very close to Pat Kraft, who was Rule's AD at Temple, and it's not two strangers. They're not best friends or anything, but they know what they're getting in each other and have spent enough time around each other.
So let me unwind this just with one other little quick question here, Pete, and that is, if it's a homecoming for Troy to go back to the Midwest and a place he's awfully familiar, and I know his family very much enjoyed their time in the Midwest, well, wasn't Trev Albert going home to Nebraska the ultimate homecoming? I mean, how does a Trev Albert leave that job, that place, that home to hit A&M?
And it's a great question too. I mean, Trev Albert's leaving Nebraska was surprising, just because he. It's such an intertwined part of his identity. And I think an underplayed part of that Albert story was that he'd only been the AD at Nebraska since 2001, but he had spent a while, like a decade-ish, as the AD at Nebraska Omaha before that. And I think that's a long time to be in like the same political waters. Mm-hmm. Bill Moose mentioned elected regents the other day. So you got people who, you're dealing with people who are dealing with constituencies there. And so I think some of the politics, and look, like Ted Carter hired Trev Alberts. He left for Ohio State. So I think that decision was as much political and landscape, as it was anything else. So, Troy Dannen gets to go to Nebraska and link arms with Matt Rule, but there is uncertainty at the presidential level now. We talk about the word alignment. I feel like Nick Saban and Urban Meyer brought alignment into our vocabulary 15 years ago or so. And so, there is, I would say, it's uncertain alignment there. I think it's a good point, Brock, that, there is some unknown there.
What do they do now? Because they gotta hire a basketball coach too. I mean, it's kind of funky timing. What does that search all of a sudden look like?
And I made a quick reference in my story that search is expected to stay on track with where it was. I mean, Danny Sprinkle's been the sort of presumed favorite in that for a while, and you're probably fishing from a Mountain West pool, right? I think that's what everybody. You guys probably spent a lot more time on Washington basketball candidates than I have, but I would think that's the general pool.
You'd be surprised. I would say you've probably spent more time. I don't think anybody's mentioned Washington basketball in this town in 5 years.
All right. So if you are a Mountain West coach and you can, I'm just guessing here, 2.5x your salary to get to the right side of the river in a Power 2, you're probably going to deal with some athletic director uncertainty and take the job, right? Like that's not going to be a, hey, I'm going to stay at Utah State, Boise State, Colorado State, etc., because I'm not certain who my boss will be. I'm going to get to the right side of the river where Washington is squarely on. And well, I think Washington is a really good basketball job, by the way. It's a tougher basketball job in the Big Ten, but Seattle produces talent. You guys know all the names, and your listeners know all the names. So I don't think, look, it is an uncomfortable moment for that search, but I think that search goes forward without too big of a hitch here. Yep. And I think whenever their target either loses in the NCAA tournament or emerges here in the next week, I think they land the plane. Now, it's going to take a couple more Zooms, right, and some explanations and some plans. And Washington's President Amare has certainly been in the thicket of some pretty interesting moments in college athletics here in the past years. She was kind of at the forefront of the Pac-12 stuff, but I don't think this is something where they're going to have to hire an interim free. I don't think it's debilitating to the search. I think it's an uncomfortable speed bump that gets smoothed over, and they get exactly who they had targeted and want.